James. Thanks for taking my call. So I'm from Romania, and I was telling your producer that Romania has never experienced democracy since we joined, basically the Iron Curtain fell in 89, without America being there as a protector. We had 7 years. In 97, we joined NATO. And since then, we have been protected by a complete takeover by the Russians. And we have, apart from maybe before 1930s,
yes,
we have never had anything like this before. Everyone's literally panicking in Romania. I don't know if you know, they canceled elections in December.
Right.
Because a huge interference from Russia was discovered for a candidate. And now we are in a process of having the second time the elections, the presidential elections. So for us, it's very, very, very worrying because...
And it's a modern worry. It's a current worry. This is what I think Anton means by peace traumatization, is that I can talk to you about the Second World War, or I can talk to you about the counterfactuals. You know, the great novels have been written about what would have happened if Hitler had invaded this country. But crucially for Eastern Europe, it's what happened after Hitler had been vanquished and Stalin got into the driving seat. And when we talk about the tanks crossing borders and moving into countries, we see history books, you see potential repetition. You see what happened in Ukraine and you think of your own history.
So I would compare it with, you know how I always hear that the Jewish suffering has been transmitted through generations?
Yes, transgenerational trauma.
Exactly. So exactly the same happened with the communism. I'm 38 and my mom is being haunted by that period, and her grandparents and my grandparents were haunted by that period even until today. So my mom is deeply affected by the way she grew up in communism.
Of course.
And I'll give you a very small example. The way you ration food. Never throw food away that is not completely finished and stuff like that. It's very small. They all come from the communist period. And for me, it's baffling sometimes. I live in UK, and but it's baffling how much they are affected by it.
And I'm looking at pictures of the Russian tanks rolling into Romania in 1947, forcibly annexing or drawing Romania into the Warsaw Pact. And the role that America plays for your generation, does your generation see America as being the major line of defense against that sort of aggression, that sort of ambition, imperial ambition?
Yes, my generation, yes. But I must say the previous generation, my parents' generation, had a dual vision on this one, because there was that Yalta Treaty where, if you remember, they carved up in a bit, Europe.
Yes.
And we felt a bit betrayed at that point by what happened between Churchill and I think it was Eisenhower.
Stalin, about us, but without us, I suppose, would be the phrase that I learned yesterday.
Exactly like one of your callers said yesterday. I listened to you, yes.
And that was in 1945. So I suppose the defence from the West would be that Stalin had played a crucial role in the defeat of the Nazis and therefore came away with expectations that the West had little choice but to meet. But that's a conversation for a different day. So finally, how do you feel personally about the not yet guaranteed but very likely prospect of the United States essentially saying to Europe, you're on your own now?
We basically feel a little bit out in the wilderness in terms of security, because there's no one else to protect us. Romania is such a small country in terms of resources. We have a shield now, so we have a NATO shield in Romania that protects us, let's say, from maybe a few rockets, but nothing on the scale that what happened in Ukraine, if it would have happened in Romania, without NATO, we would have folded in less than
which
a
is
month.
Of course what Putin thought would happen in Ukraine, and is I give or take what happened in Crimea. Andrei, thank you. Helen's in Bromley. Helen, what would you like to say?
Oh, hello, James.
Hello.
Hiya. I feel really passionately about this. My mother's Polish. I'm half Polish. I'm bilingual. And I still have a family member living in Poland. When Ukraine was invaded, we as a family didn't think it strange that we came up with an exit plan that should the balloon go up, we can get my aunt out of Poland quickly. And to me, it doesn't feel strange. To my friends, it was completely alien.
They thought you were bonkers.
Yeah, completely.
That's precisely the point I'm trying to make today, actually. But I don't think I've made it as starkly as you do, because that is a real and present concern for you. And yet for us, sitting in relative complacency, even though we're informed on current affairs, that sounds ridiculous overreaction.
No, I mean, when Litvinenko was poisoned, my mother and I were saying to each other, why is everyone so surprised in England? Because that's what the Cheka, which is pre-NKVD, that's their modus operandi. That's exactly what they did. They, the fact that they came to this country and, put British citizens at risk by putting Novichok, as they did, and killed poor Dawn, I can't remember her surname.
Sturgis.
That's exactly that. Doesn't that go to show people that they really just don't care at this point? So what they do in Europe is how much more clear could Putin be with regards to what he thinks of Ukraine? This denazification. As someone, I think it was Anton, your previous caller from Romania, what he was saying about his mother being traumatized by the communist regime. My mother, the same. It's not about food, but for example, she hoards quite a bit.
Really?
And that is purely down to the fact of the shortages. When I used to go to Poland in the 90s as a child, I very clearly remember going to the shops and queuing, and then the ensuing melee that would be in order for you to secure something. I remember the fact that you had to walk around with, my granddad had dollars in his car, because if the police, or militia as it was called then, not politia, which is a very, militia as opposed to police, he had to have dollars because he would be stopped. There would be no question. He would slip him the dollars, off you go. That was normal. And
just the primacy of the dollar itself is part of the conversation that we're having. But what role does your mum in particular, or even you, or rather, how do you respond to the idea that the United States seems set to abandon the position that it's held in this context since 1949?
Completely horrified, because Trump is essentially going back to the isolationist America that was pre-Roosevelt. So what people may not know, and some do, is that when Charles Lindbergh was in the campaign to become president or senator, I can't remember which, his campaign was based on America First.
Yes.
That isn't new. That is repeated. His actual claim was America First.
Another comment piece today, I haven't got it in front of me, but another comment piece say we're about to find out exactly what America First meant all along.
Yes, and I feel like we're living in a dystopian world. I can't watch dystopian type TV programs because to me they're too much close to the truth.
Well, that's what Margaret Atwood said about the Handmaid's Tale, actually. She said it's a warning.
I saw a T-shirt the other day saying "Make Orwell fiction again."
Yeah, well, I mean, he'd be filed under the same. America First was originally, before Lindbergh, it was Woodrow Wilson's mantra for keeping the United States out of the First World War on the grounds that it has nothing to do with us. And you're right, it seems to be a very resurgent philosophy. And it's one, I think we were right, going by the early responses to the question, that in Britain we do have that thing that Anton told us was called peace traumatization, that idea that we don't understand the immediacy of a threat, even after watching Russian tanks pour into Ukraine, pour into Crimea, expecting on both occasions to be unchallenged, correctly on the second one in Crimea, but incorrectly, as it turned out, on Kyiv.
Hi, good morning, James. I spoke to you a couple of times. I'm a former UN interpreter from Bosnia.
I remember, yes.
Yeah. I'm just listening to your callers as well. There is loads of concerns with the bordering countries that border Russia, like Baltic states, Poland, and all that. But it's important to know that this American withdrawal from Europe, it's affecting the Balkans now again. It's starting to flare up in Bosnia. The Serbs are again calling now. They waited for the Trump to get in, start calling again for partition of Bosnia. And it's important to know that Americans intervened in 1995 to stop the Balkans, to stop a war in Bosnia. And recent Trump's information is that stopping U.S. aid, it's affected over 100 NGOs operating in the Balkans.
Already?
already. It's because the funding is being stopped. And there are calls that, well, it is evident. I mean, I listen to Bosnian news every single day and watch Bosnian TV, that the Serbs in Bosnia are being almost propped up by Russia now, and lack of American involvement already start calling partition of Kosovo, Bosnia, and there are serious fears that I hope I will not call you in 2 or 3 years' time to say, remember when we spoke, the Bosnian war has kicked off again.
So do
because the EU, it's concentrating on Ukraine. Serbs will use this opportunity now. America turned away, EU too busy trying to sort the Ukraine problem. Let's have de facto restart the Bosnian war.
We're talking about territorial ambitions, a greater Serbia.
Exactly. What they haven't achieved in 1995, that they were stopped by America, they will now try again. There are already political difficulties in Bosnia. The Serbs are stalling progression of Bosnia into EU and into NATO. It's all fueled by Russia. So it's not just bordering states, it's internal states that Russia will use to destabilize Europe further.
And the role that the United States plays in terms of soft power in resisting that is best illustrated by what you've just said about the NGOs Elon Musk boasting about putting USAID through the shredder. I think he said he'd put it through put it through the shredder, and you know, they're telling lies about condoms in Gaza or something like that, but not mentioning the fact that these organisations that exist to uphold
civic society.
Civic society is the phrase I wanted. Exactly that are often funded by the richest country in the world.
Yeah, to prop up this Bosnian youth, Serbian youth, Kosovo youth, to be more pro-European, which they are. I mean, there are major protests in Serbia happening now against the current Serbian government, which is very sitting on two chairs. Vucic is sitting on a European chair and on a Russia chair. Now he's accepted the invitation for May Day celebrations to go and meet Putin with Lukashenko and all that. It's really worrying that Vucic is playing dangerous cards, but he looks like that he's leaning towards Russia now. And
I guess when you listen to me on the radio, or at least when you listen to most UK media, the sense you get is, I use the word we very loosely, are not really involved in this. We're not really affected by this. And yet for everybody else, it's a real and present threat. I mean, it's a moment of jeopardy, genuine jeopardy. Yeah. Is there a silver lining of sorts? I've seen a brilliant thread on Blue Sky by Sam Friedman, who's a commentator I admire enormously. And he talks about the possibility of a realignment that would see Europe emerge stronger and more committed to the sort of causes that you describe.
Possibly. It's Brexit. Don't start me on that.
Don't you hate people who can't let Brexit go, Edin? Honestly, there's nobody worse.
This was the scenario that Russia played through Brexit to destabilize UK, to destabilize Europe. That we got, Farage and them supporting it. They just don't realize what have they done to the UK. They torn us from that a bubble of protection of our friends who are like literally 22 miles across the pond. That this couldn't be played better for Russia now. Destabilize this. Trump is like this way saying, "You're on your own, guys," and Russia now said, "Thanks very much. We'll crack on."
And back to the role of America and the significance of its diminishment, Darius, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Hi, Brian. Sorry. I'm from Lithuania originally. I live in London now, but I old enough to remember old days while we were still the part of Soviet Union, and Lithuania was occupied by Russians after the Second World War. And back then, my grandmother was really a young kid. She used to take me to the kind of furthest room on her farm, to close the door, and tell me the stories, how everything happened. And back then, she told me, I remember it clearly, that, Americans through American Voice Radio were always telling us that we're going to come and we're going to liberate you. You just need to hold up and, and wait. And because of that, thousands of young men and boys went to the woods in Lithuania to fight Russians.
I didn't know that. And that's soft. That's soft power, isn't it? Again, that's what gets filed under foreign aid now by tabloid journalists. But running media organisations and NGOs like the ones you and Edin have described is part of the foreign aid expenditure to keep what we would call values alive. To keep values alive.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Those guys were promised that someday, very, very near future, the Americans will come and the country will be liberated. We will be helped in the fight against Russian communist government back then. And it never happened. Thousands and thousands of boys and young men died in the woods. And the last ones were in 1956.
And the Iron Curtain came down with you on the wrong side of it.
Yeah. And
but
then,
now,
when I was kind of young lad back then, 30 years ago, when we were first in Soviet Union to break away from Soviet Union, and we said we're going to be independent, and we kind of stood firm, on that. Even then, some Americans came to us and said, no, don't rock the boat. You just need to go slowly because you can.
So you've got a much more complicated relationship with the United States than some of the other people that we've spoken to, and yet Lithuania today in the European Union, in the Council of Europe, in NATO, in Schengen, in the Eurozone, all of which, I mean, with the exception of NATO and in the OECD as well. What does an American withdrawal from Europe and the message that sends to the Kremlin say to you? What does that?
It's repeating of history. Now, one day they say, "Oh, we're going to help you," and next day, Just of his world comes and say, "No, we're going to look after our own."
That's really, really interesting. It's a much broader. You take a much broader historical sweep and say America let us down last time, and now they're going to let us down again. Whereas I see the modern United States as being distinct, deeply distinct from the United States of FDR, which again is the complacency of my history, my geography.
It's always been like up and downs, and we can thank America for many good things they did, but it was always on the edge, and
and that is something you'd have to grow up in Lithuania and elsewhere to feel. As I've said from 10 o'clock this morning, something I can't feel because I don't have that personal investment.
Hello, James.
Hello.
I remember phoning you 3 years ago when Putin invaded Ukraine. And
I remember it very well, Clara.
Oh, you do?
Of course I do. You're Hungarian. You're a Hungarian refugee, I think.
I am, yes, that's right. And as I was telling your research, I'm quite emotional a bit about it at the moment with everything that's happening. Because obviously I've lived in the UK for 68 years now. And but I've been back to Hungary and, a number of times, still have family there. And my father actually left me his autobiography that he wrote just before he died. And I've been researching my family tree, so obviously I've been going through it and what have you. And it suddenly I realised that the main reason that my life evolved the way that it did and why I had to leave my homeland and family and language and culture was because of this, political ideology and the way sort of communists and dictators, and after the war and everything happened because obviously Hungary became behind the Iron Curtain, and when the Hungarian, I won't give too big a history, but when the Hungarian Revolution sort of exploded, the Prime Minister Mlinoz at the time was actually putting out over the radio messages asking for help from America, because behind the scenes, America and the CIA had been encouraging the freedom fighters, because obviously America, they were anti-communist, as you know. McCarthy and everything was a big anti-communist. But then when the Hungarians, wanted to uprise against the communist regime and what they were doing to the Hungary and their ideology, I think they honestly thought that America would be there and help. And obviously, for their own political or whatever reasons, they didn't. And
this is missing. This was missing before you and Darius rang in from our conversation today. That period between the end of the Second World War and the fall of the Iron Curtain, when the United States was no use whatsoever to people in either of your home countries. But in the period since the peace, if you like, that since the collapse of the Soviet Union, America, the United States, has been the biggest guardian of that peace, and now they're off. So how are you feeling about that today? Well,
that's really what sort of scares me and worries me for the Eastern European and for Europe. Because obviously Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary now, as you know, for a number of years, he's got this real sort of right-wing nationalistic ideology, which, let's face it, Trump and the Republicans over there have really embraced, and
seem to have done, and that is, I mean, the first time that's ever happened. There's a difference between not being there to support the freedom fighters or the resistance in Lithuania and Hungary, and turning into a United States version of the actual nationalist oppression, which is what some people feel might be happening in the White House. Clara, I have to go because I'm late for the news, but it's lovely to hear your voice again. Thank you so much for ringing in, and I hope you and your family